The Nirvana day is a day Shakyamuni Buddha entered Nirvana. Nirvana means enlightenment, awakening, satori. But the question is, does Nirvana only apply to the Buddha? In other words, does Nirvana apply to you? How about your awakening? That's what this video answers today. And my answer is based on my 20 years of practice of Buddhism, and especially the Buddhist teaching and the sutra called the Lotus Sutra. Okay? So today we're going to do two things. First, we briefly overview the core teaching of Buddhism. If you're new to Buddhism or advanced student of Buddhism, it all applies to all of you. And the second part is my story. To me, the most joyful part of my Buddhist learning is when we apply what I learn in Buddhism into my everyday life practice. So the result is amazing. So that's what I want to show you today. So let's take a look at this chart. Nirvana, samsara, suffering, impermanence, no self. So this is so-called the Buddhist teaching of the 4 seals of Dharma. The idea is simple. Let me show you how. So let's say you wonder, why do I hate myself? Why do I have this kind of attachment? I really want to get rid of that. Why my relationship with this person and my family and my colleague, like a friendship and so on, don't go well with me? You ask why the life is suffering in that moment of frustration, unsatisfaction and so on. Buddhism answers this way. Well, good question. Let me give you an answer. Their answer is this. There's some certain kind of the universal principle. In Buddhist version of that, we express that in terms of the 2 teachings. One is the impermanence of all things, and the second is the no self, or the interrelation of all things. If you ignore these fundamental universal principles, that leads to your experience of suffering in your everyday life. But that means one should become aware of your ignorance and trying to improve that by learning and applying these teachings into your everyday life, applying to your suffering. Then that starts to, reorient that suffering into different direction toward nirvana. Ignoring the teachings leads to suffering. Accepting and practicing the teaching leads to nirvana. Which one would you choose? That's what the Buddhism asks you. Okay? Here's a little deeper look. So things you desire, things you're attached to, are also changing. So if you stick to that attachment, then that leads to unsatisfactoriness and suffering. So teaching of no self. If you stick to your own identity, old identity, in the past I was like this, so that should be the case for the future. It's never going to happen. When I was in Japan, I was a very fluent English speaker. After I came to the US, like several years ago, I was one of the worst, most primitive English speaker, and I suffered from that gap of my identity a lot. But as soon as I let go of that, no self, I was kind of freed from that kind of suffering. So that's a nirvana moment, right? So impermanence and no self are everywhere in every single scene of our everyday life. And the Buddhist suggestion is, let's use this wisdom to reach nirvana in your life. So how does that sound to you? Let me know in comments. And let me end with my story of struggle with how to accept myself as an example of the process of nirvana. It's not always easy to tell my story of struggle and practice, but please allow me to share that with you. That's part of my practice of speaking with honesty, okay? So the goal of my Buddhist practice is to accept who I am and to use what I don't like about myself as my way of reaching out to a particular audience who are perhaps undergoing a similar situation that I have, so that we can attain nirvana together. So actually, that's my YouTube channel is all about, and this goes back to my own childhood story. I think I grew up suppressing my feelings, like true feelings and my opinions to others. So my mom used to praise me when I was little so much in many aspects of myself. So that certainly gave me a sense of confidence of who I am. But at the same time, I started to be attached to, being praised by others, or like being loved by others. So eventually, I realized I became someone who always tried to hide my true feelings or my opinions so that people would love me more or would not dislike me at least. Hiding your true feelings means not to speak with honesty. So inability to be honest with yourself has been a big part of my challenge, big part of my suffering. So I was looking for a community where people express their feelings and listening to each other as a part of their meditative practice. And what I found was my Buddhist community called Richard Kosekai. And if you want to know more about that, the activities and how you can get involved, please check that information in the description box below. And you may wonder, yes, you're right. Of course, not being honest has some strength. Like you can maintain harmonious relationship with others. People get mad at you, but you look calm and do not react to that. So it doesn't lead to a fight any further. Sure, this is part of my strength. But at the same time, when it comes to like friendship, important relationship with the clients, or like my family relationship and so on, this is something that needs to be improved, I concluded. So for instance, this morning my wife disturbed my sleep and for some reason it made me get up. So that irritated me a little. So later she said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I was unkind this morning. Did that irritate you?" And I said, "No, not really, so never mind." Right after I said that, I was like, "Oh my Buddha, again? I did not speak with honesty again." So this snowballed my initial irritation because my second disappointment at myself not being able to speak with honesty further irritated me. So I'm in the spiral of suffering, right? Over here. So over the years, I'm getting better at doing this practice, even though I still need to spiritually grow so much. So this path is challenging and scary at the same time, to be honest. But that's where the Buddhist teaching kicks in. So for instance, here, impermanence of all things, right? This means that even though I cannot imagine myself getting unstuck with personal problems, I will be able to see that change in the future and eventually overcome, unless I stop my Buddhist practice. So Buddhism gives me hope in that sense. Hope of one day accepting who I am. And in this sense, according to the Lotus Sutra, Nirvana is never separate from samsara or suffering. Because Nirvana means the mastery of the cycle of suffering. Truly embracing who you are. Spiritually discovering your true self. So in that sense, when it comes to the question of whose Nirvana is that? That's your Nirvana, your Buddhahood. And the Lotus Sutra says, yes, anyone can do that. So now let's go back to our question. Does Nirvana only apply to the Buddha? How about your enlightenment? Here's my answer. Nirvana only applies to the Buddha, but the Buddhahood, to become Buddha, is what we will all attain in the future. So being who you are in the present is how this Buddhahood expresses as who you are in the moment of your practice of Buddhism. In this sense, Nirvana, Buddhahood, is not something to be reached in the future. But rather, Nirvana is in the mastery of suffering. Nirvana is in essence process. Nirvana is occurring in your Buddhist practice and coping with your problems and trying your best to overcome your problems. It is nowhere else than your everyday Buddhist practice where your Nirvana can only express itself.